I see people are still joining, but perhaps we can start. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you are. My name is Elizabeth Lule, the Executive Director of the ECD Action Network, and I will co-moderate the webinar with Kristen McDonough from the Global Partnership for Education. So welcome to today's webinar, Global Advocacy, Local Action, Harnessing the Power of Advocacy to Advance Progress Towards SDG 4.2 in 2023. And before I get into more details, just a few logistical issues. Please use the chat to introduce yourself and from wherever you're coming from, and put your comments and any questions that you may have. We also have a Q&A that could be directed to specific panelists. And if you have any technical issues, also please let us know, and my colleagues will try and sort that out, Hannah or Alexis, and you can put that in the chat as well. So this event is part of a webinar series developed in partnership between UNICEF and ECDAN, with support from the Knowledge and Innovation Exchange KICS project, which aims to support the integration of early childhood education within education sector planning processes through the use of better early learning and development at scale, otherwise known as BELTS approach, and the Early Childhood Education Accelerator Toolkit. So as for framing this webinar, let us begin by recognizing how momentous last year was for early childhood education, with 2 global convenings that brought stakeholders together to discuss how to accelerate progress on SDG 4.2, the Transforming Education Summit and the World Conference on Early Childhood Care and Education secured new commitments from countries, UN agencies, international development banks, and other partners to strengthen early education and care systems. So we are here today to talk about what's next and how we can leverage advocacy to accelerate progress and implementing those commitments. And we will begin with a report on the commitments made at the Transforming Education Summit and the World Conference on ECCE, from Euphrates Efosiwose, Senior Advisor at UNICEF, and Guangzhou Chang, Chief Education Policy at UNESCO. We will then hear from partners utilizing advocacy to strengthen ECE systems and services in their countries. And then we'll hear from UNICEF and BRAC on advocacy strategies and tools that have been effective for them. We will also hear from the Ministry of Education in Ghana about the government strategy, as well as understand what advocacy tactics have been most effective from a government's point of view. After the country panel, we will shift back to the global level and hear from a global panel of experts representing Global Partnership on Education, UNESCO, Sesame Workshop, and UNICEF to discuss what's next for implementing the commitments made at the Transforming Education Summit and the World Conference on ECCE, and how global actions will support country and regional partners to advance these priorities together. During the webinar, we will share key global resources such as the ECE Accelerator Toolkit that can help ECE stakeholders in developing and implementing contextually appropriate ECE advocacy strategies. And now I'll pass it off to Euphrates, who is a Senior Education Advisor at UNICEF, and Guangzhou Chang, Chief of Education Policy at UNESCO, to share priorities and commitments in ECE that emerged from both the Transforming Education Summit and the World Conference. Over to you, Euphrates.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Colleagues, warm greetings. We are really delighted that you are able to join this webinar today. At UNICEF, I must tell you that we are thrilled to partner and jointly co-host this event with ECDAN and UNESCO under our shared ambition and continued commitment to early childhood education. I'm glad to report that under our partnership, the Knowledge Information Exchange Initiative, the UNICEF-led KICS ECE project is delivering on a couple of things. The first is strengthening the capacity of education systems to implement quality early childhood education programs at scale. And secondly, generating global knowledge and resources on ECE policies, programs, and practices. Now, these evidence pieces are being used for our advocacy efforts to leverage the playing field as we are all striving to ensure that all girls and boys have access to quality early childhood development, care, and pre-primary education so that our children across the globe are ready for learning at primary. The significance of this initiative cannot be overstated. We are seeing more governments unified in their resolve to embrace ECE as an important strategy to addressing the learning crisis. Now, at TESS, at least half of the commitments were on foundational learning, identified free universal early childhood education as a key to narrowing the literacy achievement gaps in primary grades. Post the Transforming Education Summit also, we see 149 of the 208 countries that have prioritized early childhood education as part of their national strategy, in line with the updated 2030 framework for action. Now, to take these aspirations to action, we are seeing an estimated 38% of this 149 countries making some progress, really fast progress towards children's participation in early childhood education. Remember, I'm still speaking about participation. We are not there at quality yet. Within this category of countries that are making progress, 15 of them are low and lower middle income countries who have their targets, and benchmarks on track. However, we still have another 58% of countries that are really registering slow progress or lacking the data required to estimate trends, which makes the challenge of universalizing access to at least 1 year of organized learning ahead of primary enrollment by 2030 daunting. For the 38% of countries that are making progress, we are beginning to see some innovative approaches. To mention public-private partnerships, community-based provisions, all of these efforts attempting to, bridge that gap in provision. These approaches are not without their challenges. For example, the overall increase of pre-primary enrollment around the globe have been driven significantly by non-state provision, which now supports our data showing that ECE has the highest share of private provision when compared to other levels of education. That said, we are seeing that when policies around compulsory education legislation and equity-oriented regulation of private provision are in place, it has proven to increase the levels of participation in pre-primary education. Clearly, I think the way forward demands a combination of approaches, but I would like to just take a moment to quickly highlight 4 of them. One of them is government stewardship, and government stewardship to increase access to quality, inclusive primary education through a multi-stakeholder engagement, as well as using alternative pathways. It is really imperative for that stewardship to happen, for this kind of multi-stakeholder engagement to take place, if we must obtain the human, financial, and institutional resources required to close the gaps. The second thing I'm going to point to is multi-stakeholder engagement. And this is where our respective organizational capacities pulled together at global, regional, and country levels become really crucial in supporting governments to innovate, to implement, to monitor, and to report on progress. I would like to take this opportunity to reassure you that at UNICEF, we are really embarking on this. Across 190 countries, we have our ECE staff, all of whom have deep expertise, have networks of trusted contacts and relationships including most times our senior staff at country level, the representatives who engage with ministers and private sector partners. They will continue to support governments to promote evidence-based policy formulation and program implementation to reach the most vulnerable children. Thirdly, at the outcome of the partnership, an outcome of a partnership like this one that we share has resulted in the development of an ECE toolkit. One may say that an ECE toolkit, an online resource, what is that? This resource has been used to support the capacities of various countries in terms of systematic subsector analysis, including the consideration of costed policy and program options for ECE as a first step towards achieving their target. Now, the feedback, the anecdotal feedback we're getting from the participants who've engaged in this has really been very encouraging. The fourth and the last option, to mention just a few as I indicated, is advocacy, which is one of the tools that we can use together to further achieve our goal of advancing ECE. Working with ECE advocates, the adoption of context and target appropriate approaches for convening, coalition building, awareness raising, and evidence generation have been valuable tactics to sustain domestic leadership, implementation of policies, and strengthening key action drivers of ECE systems. The 2022 provided multiple global opportunities for us all at national, at regional, and global level. To mention the TESS, Transforming Education Summit, and the World Conference on ECE. It also gave us the platform to launch commitments to action on foundational learning and the Tashkent Declaration. This was building on more than 30 years of advocacy to position ECE as an integral part of education systems. I'm just going to look a little bit into the commitments to action of foundational learning. Emerging from TESS, the commitment to action on foundational learning emphasized that there is the urgent need for global community to take collective action to achieve transformative change for our youngest learners and nation. It also recognized that if we are to ensure that by age 10, every child can read, write, and comprehend a simple sentence, we need to ensure that the foundations for school readiness are built through early childhood education. That same commitment to action on foundational learning presents a strategic opportunity for partners to advance ECE at country level by using that platform to leverage governments to universalize at least 1 year of organized learning before children enroll in primary school. This, we feel that is a first step in maintaining and holding leadership accountable and creating an accommodating environment for continued ECE advocacy and programming. On behalf of UNICEF and our partners, it is my pleasure today to welcome you to this webinar, to share experiences of our partners and reflect on how synergies between global, regional, and country level advocacy initiatives can be leveraged to promote ECE agenda forward as we collectively aim to meet the targets of SDG 4.2 commitments. Together, we can support governments to meet their ambition to bridge that gap between the immense political will for ECE and action, reaching their 2025 benchmarks and creating pathways for success in 2020. I would now like to stop here and hand over to our colleague from UNESCO, Guangzhou Chang, to share the takeaways from Tashkent Declaration and how we can use the declaration as a tool to further leverage our advocacy at country, regional, and national levels. Thank you very much. Over to you, Guangzhou.
Thank you, Fratis. Also, thank you, the organizers, for giving UNESCO the opportunity to share the essence of the Tashkent Declaration and also some follow-up actions being developed. So as you know, the World Conference on Early Childhood Care and Education, hosted by Uzbekistan in November last year, was an intergovernmental conference. This followed the landmark Transforming Education Summit that took place 2 months earlier, as Efratis has elaborated on. It brought together more than 1,000 participants, including leaders from 150 member states and around 100 organizations representing UN, civil society, intergovernmental bodies, the private sector, and academia, to reaffirm the importance of high-quality ECCE for all young children. In collaboration with the partner organizations, many of whom are around the table today, we provided a forum through a mix of plenaries, parallel sessions, panel discussions to exchange ideas and promising practices. The conference culminated in the adoption of the Tashkent Declaration and its commitment to action to transforming early childhood care and education. The idea to organize this conference was born during the COVID-19 period, when progress towards achieving SDG 4 was stalled and early childhood care, well-being, and education were particularly neglected in government's response to the health crisis. Despite the evidence of the benefits of quality early child care and education for the lifelong learning trajectory for all children and the social and economic returns to societies, only 22% of UN member states have made pre-primary education compulsory, and only 45% would provide at least 1 year of free pre-primary education. In low and low middle income countries, fewer than 2 in 3 children attend organized learning 1 year before the official primary entry age. The world is facing the generational catastrophe around the learning crisis, which is due in many parts of the world to the lack of quality early care and stimulation services that can help prepare better young children to school learning. The Tashkent Declaration adopted at the conference is comprised of 2 main parts. The first part comprised of the guiding principles and strategies along 4 priority areas, which are equitable and inclusive quality ECC services for all. Second is ECC personnel. 3, innovations for transformation. And the last one is policy governance and financing issues. The second part of the declaration is the commitments to action of member states and development partners for transforming early childhood care and education. According to this declaration, it is for governments, member states, to commit to further improve policy and legal frameworks to guarantee the right of every child to inclusive quality ECCE, to ensure at least 1 year of free and compulsory quality pre-primary education for all, to strive towards equal qualifications, conditions, status between ECC staff and at least primary school teachers, also to ensure quality learning for all children, including social emotional skills, and to support their transition to formal primary education, and also to increase financing for ECC to a level sufficient to achieve SDG 4.2, in particular working towards the allocation of at least 10% of education expenditure to pre-primary education, and also to integrate and strengthen ECC policies and strategies into whole of government, interministerial, and multi-stakeholder approaches, and also for the international community and non-governmental stakeholders to commit to develop and strengthen interagency collaboration and partnership in the spirit of the global partnership strategy for early childhood that we collectively launched in 2021, and to increase aid to support ECC and ensure that it is included in global initiatives such as the Global Partnership for Education and Education Cannot Wait, to ensure also visibility of the work of civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations as crucial partners and innovators for advancing ECCE, and also to include ECCE in the SDG 4 Global Coordination Mechanism and work with the SDG, for instance, SDG 4 technical advisory group to improve monitoring of SDG 4.2 by further developing and strengthening the early childhood development index. Last but not least, for also international partners, especially ILO, OECD, UNESCO, the World Bank, GP, and other organizations to join hands in preparing a joint biannual review to report on the progress made on SDG 4.2. As follow-up, 3 strands of action are being developed by UNESCO that I'm presenting below. The first is support for implementation of the Tashkent Declaration, which will be undertaken through 2 tracks. One, for countries to review the existing legal policy governance framework in light of the Tashkent Declaration, and also subsequently take necessary measures to strengthen these from a sector-wide and system-wide perspective. An annotated template is to be developed, possibly as a complement to the ECE Accelerator Toolkit, as Efrat mentioned, to support countries in the Tashkent follow-up review process. And here, under the first trend, the second track is to revitalize global partnership strategy for early childhood mechanism as a leverage to further mobilize partners and to support in a coordinated and collaborative way countries' effort to transform ECCE at the country and subnational levels. The second strand is about monitoring and reporting, which is to be undertaken through the developing a monitoring framework for the Tashkent Declaration, which is to be approved by UNESCO governing bodies and to be implemented using the existing mechanisms such as SDG Technical Advisory Group by further strengthening the Early Child Development Index. And also engaging in the production of an annual joint report through an alliance of UNESCO, UNICEF, World Bank, ILO, GP, and OECD. And to that end, a message for collaboration has been sent out to the principals of this organization. And also developing and regularly updating an interactive compendium of promising practices to support peer learning and policy learning across regions, countries, and communities. The last third strand is about coordination, advocacy, and partnerships. And this strand will be structured around the leveraging with SDG 4 mechanisms as an umbrella for cooperation, coordination, and joint monitoring of follow-up activities, and also organizing regional thematic consultations to sustain the momentum for country engagement, advocacy, policy learning around the Tashkent Declaration's principles, strategies, and commitments. And lastly, communication, advocacy, and also resource mobilization plans to support the follow-up of the Tashkent Declaration. These are the gist of what we would like to share with you. And to make it happen, we have to work together, and we will discuss with you about how we can deliver on the Tashkent commitment. Thank you again for inviting UNESCO.
Thank you, Guangzhou and Euphrates. It really is wonderful to see how partners are collaborating together and including friends from the Global Partnership of Education. So we will now shift to the most exciting part and focus at the country level to highlight effective advocacy and government strategies, as well as country partner needs and recommendations. And to moderate this discussion, I'd like to pass it over to Christine McConnell, the education specialist at the Global Partnership for Education. Over to you, Christine.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so pleased to see the chat full of eager participants. I may be a little bit biased, but I also agree that I think this is the most exciting portion of the session where we really get to hear some country examples. So in my global role at GP, I get very, very excited to see ambitious early childhood education goals within education sector plans. but I don't always get the opportunity, it's sitting at a headquarters type role to unpack why a certain objective was met or unmet in a particular country. So I'm really looking forward to this session to learn more about the advocacy tactics in 3 countries today. So I'm delighted to introduce to you our 3 distinguished panelists who are here today. Representing Sierra Leone, we have Massey Tucker, who is an education officer with UNICEF Sierra Leone's office there. Welcome, Massey. Representing Bangladesh, I have Syed Mohammed Sunny, who's the manager for strategy and partnership at BRAC. Welcome, Syed. And for Ghana, I'm pleased that we have Isaac Ataba, who's the ECE program officer and focal point for the Ministry of Education. So welcome, Isaac. So all 3 of our country panelists, I'm going to ask you to begin with kind of the same 3 questions, and I'm going to ask you to give some remarks on. So to kind of give us an introduction, it would be wonderful to hear, specifically, what is the advocacy objective you have for early childhood education in your country, and why is that advocacy objective a priority for you? My second question to you is going to be, what is one advocacy tactic that has been most effective in advancing this objective, right? This could be a number of different things, from coalition building to lobbying to mobilizing the public. We'd really kind of love to hear your country experience on that advocacy tactic. And lastly, if you can give us some insights on kind of what concrete steps you have taken, or within your country has taken or will take to leverage the global commitments, made at TESS and the World Conference on Early Childhood Education to advance your advocacy at the country level. So I'll first turn it over to Massey. If you probably in 5 minutes or so could answer those questions, and then we'll turn it over to Bangladesh to follow. Over to you, Massey. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you very much, Christine. I want to start with saying a good day to all of you, and I am happy to be here to share Sierra Leone's experience. And Sierra Leone is one of the countries that is implementing the KICS program and supporting us in our advocacy effort and also in our educational planning. And coming to your first question, in Sierra Leone, and our advocacy objective was to ensure a systematic integration of early childhood objectives into an education sector plan, the current education sector plan 2022-2026, and to ensure that there is an improved access and quality pre-primary education for pre-primary learners in Sierra Leone. And why did we select this and particular objective, or what is the problem? In Sierra Leone in 2010, that is before we started this journey, and an education policy clearly stated that there is free and compulsory pre-primary education for children aged 3 to 5, and it should be free and compulsory. However, the gross intake as at 2019, before we started this journey in 2020, was 23.4%. And this indicates that most children at age 3 are not attending school, despite the policy saying that they should be in school. And also the gross enrollment rate at that time was 19%, and 52% of them were girls. And in terms of budgeting, only 2% of basic education budgets was allocated to pre-primary education, which is an issue. And we thought this is something we have to address, and this led us to developing our advocacy objective and to ensure that we have EC integrated into the education planning processes. And this objective, we agree, because it was also a critical moment for the government, and education was a priority for the government, and it was relatively high. And the investment by the government, which is 21% of the gross domestic product of the country, was invested in education. Irrespective of that, it was only 2% allocated to pre-primary school. So that's why we selected that advocacy objective, and it was a problem, and we said let's address that. And also another reason was that in all the education sector plan done previously, pre-primary education was embedded in primary. So EC objectives, we are not standalone subsectors in the education sector plans. So that resulted in the underdevelopment of the sector. So we said, okay, let's have this objective of integrating pre-primary in the education sector plan. What tool did we, one advocacy tactics we use in our context here, because was to leverage on partnership and coalition building. And that's we realize will become very much effective. We leverage on partnership and we build coalition to advance our advocacy objective. In doing that, we form the Early Childhood Education Technical Working Group, and that group comprises technical officials from various ministries. For instance, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Technical and Higher Education, and also civil society partners. Yeah, and why we selected these tactics, because we realized that once we have a coalition will be like a full force to put forward our advocacy objective, to engage the government officials, to engage key officials in the government who are decision makers, to actually help us in terms of achieving this advocacy objective. At the outset, we realized that the objective and the tactics will influence our target. The tactic will influence our target. And we know as a coalition and as partners will engage, for instance, the Ministry of Finance to let them know about the budget allocation to the subsector. We'll engage the Ministry of Basic and Senior Secondary Education in terms of curriculum development, in terms of ensuring access, in terms of ensuring quality. And so we knew that in a way for us to achieve this an objective was to kind of leverage on the partnership and coalition and to kind of achieve this objective. And one result which we got from our advocacy was we use the EC through our use of the EC Accelerator Toolkit, and then we were able to support advocacy, and we had several wish lists of policies and then strategies to strengthen EC in Sierra Leone. And to that, from the wish list, we moved to a reality of having a robust EC objectives in the ESP. So we are successful with that. Currently, the education sector plan in the country, Sierra Leone, 2022-2026, has EC objectives in the education sector plan for the very first time in education sector planning. And we know we have to continue with our advocacy, and we have devised some concrete steps which we'll take in terms of leveraging the global commitment from TESS and then the World Conference on Early Childhood Education. So what's on our end we have agreed to do is that we will continue to leverage on government momentum and support. We know high at the agenda is education for the government, and we'll continue to leverage on that, and also leverage on the fact that the Sierra Leone signed the TS commitment to action on foundational learning, and we intend to leverage on this commitment and political will by making the investment case for EC as a critical step in ensuring school readiness to improve foundational learning outcomes for children in Sierra Leone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Massey. It was really great to hear the Sierra Leone example. I have to chime in from the GP perspective. Again, that last point that you made about, pre-primary is really embedded in Sierra Leone for advancing the foundational learning agenda and solving the learning crisis. We also see that Sierra Leone is one of the first set of countries who have a country partnership compact. And I was so pleased to see that pre-primary education is really embedded there as part of Sierra Leone's focus on foundational learning. So it's great to kind of see all of these different mechanisms kind of working in together. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Bangladesh. So Syed, can you give your perspective from the Bangladesh story? Over to you.
Thank you, Christine, and hello, everyone. My name is Sunny, Syed Mahmoud Sunny from BRAC, and it was lovely, really insightful to hear from Macy's experience from Sierra Leone as well. Today, I want to talk about and bring an example from Bangladesh, where the objective of the education ministry was to ensuring the integration of play-based and social-emotional learning into Bangladesh's new nationwide curriculum for the 4 to 5 year olds as part of the whole 2-year pre-primary curriculum. Bangladesh has always prioritized education reformation, which stands to be an example of government and non-state partnership since 1985. In 2013, the government mandated a 1-year pre-primary education for learners aging 5+ prior to their pre-primary education. Following that, the government has also passed the Child Care Act in its effort towards early childhood care and education. Therefore, we could see that there was a momentum and endorsement towards ECCE to develop a 2-year pre-primary curriculum mandating children to join pre-primary classroom from the age of 4. However, we all know COVID delayed that process and additionally brought in the new dimension for the need of social-emotional learning for the early years. This dire need of mental well-being and also the endorsement of mental health nationally really drove the need to ensure the integration of play-based learning and psychosocial well-being into Bangladesh's new nationwide curriculum for 4 to 5 year olds, and also the review of the existing 5 to 6 year old curriculum. Following a series of engaging and lobbying with the government, in 2022, the government completed the development of the 4 to 5 curriculum to be piloted in 3,000 schools from the year 2023 to 2026. Now, education reformation tends to be very slow in Bangladesh, and one of the key reasons is, of course, its vast population. In order to cater to the 165 million population, we are currently operating over 65,000 government primary schools in Bangladesh. And therefore, since the pilot is of 3,000 schools, we can understand the scale is of massive range. One of the key advocacy tactics that we took was obviously develop coalitions with global actors in government. As the education minister in Tashkent, of Bangladesh in Tashkent, always endorsed the coalitions, the need of partnership between non-state actors. This has been an example through the formation of education, the formal, non-formal education, and the formal education in Bangladesh. So this is an endorsement we all get in terms of early childhood care and education reformation in Bangladesh. An example that I would draw in terms of our coalitions and of global actors and government would be as part of a Lego-funded Play to Learn consortium with Sesame Workshop and IRC. BRAC and the entire consortium worked on these exercises that conducted under Advocacy initiative was to identify pathways to strategically engage with stakeholders, including the government. This guided us to engage in roundtables and webinars with government officials, which shed light on the very challenge that some key decision makers and policymakers still did not have the basic understanding of early childhood development. This urged us to enroll these key policymakers within government sectors on a master's course on ECD by directly lobbying with them to build their knowledge and capacities around ECD. In addition, we were also required to demonstrate and build evidence on the work on play labs and early years intervention in both government primary schools and the Rohingya camps as part of humanitarian response. These collective strategies and continuous lobbying with the government stakeholders widely resulted in endorsement of the early years work and consecutively urged the government to develop the pre-primary curriculum technical committee in partnership with the non-state actors, INGOs, to pass policies around the incorporation of the 2-year play-based and psychosocial integrated pre-primary curriculum in Bangladesh. Now that the policy has been in place, a play-based psychosocial integrated pre-primary curriculum has been developed, much work needs to be focused to take this to scale into the 65,000 government primary schools in Bangladesh. There needs to be a massive focus on teachers training of the regional offices and frontline staff training of the facilitators who are conducting these pre-primary classes in government primary schools. In addition, we aim to leverage on the learnings and the legacy products or the technical packages that are being developed under the Play to Learn Coalition to develop guidelines and tools for quality intervention and scale of play-based ECD in emergencies and crisis context. In terms of commitment, I think we all have heard about the Tashkent Declaration and the tests. As mentioned, currently there is a momentum and acknowledgement of early childhood care and education as well as mental well-being within the government ministries of Bangladesh. With Bangladesh Education Minister endorsing public-private partnership in Tashkent and with the commitment to the Tashkent Declaration, we aim to leverage on this momentum build on the existing relationship with governments, form more strategic coalitions with the government, funders, and actors, and move forward with our efforts to embedding play-based ECD and social-emotional learning within all government primary schools of Bangladesh. Our focus will be increasing investment for ECCE and initiating quality teachers training and focus on improving enrollment of the learners as part of the pilots of 3,000 at government primary school, and then to the scale of the remaining 63,000 plus schools in Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Syed. I really enjoyed the Bangladesh example, especially your concrete example of how you build that coalition, and really building the knowledge base within the ministry and other kind of key stakeholders was an interesting tactic there. Last but not least, I'd love to turn it over to Isaac to give us Ghana's experience in their policy objective. Isaac, over to you.
Okay, so good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone in the house. So my name is Isaac Ataba, and the Principal Program Officer in charge of early childhood education here in Ghana. So to start with, first go straight to the policy objective. And so the objective is we have developed family and community engagement guidelines. This is basically to address the family and community engagement action plan in the policy. So this year we are basically using the developed guidelines to support the implementation of the family and community engagement action area of the early childhood policy to ensure that parents are empowered to enroll and support their children in early learning at the right age. So someone will ask, why this? What is the priority? Why this objective? So in Ghana, what we have realized is that we don't have issues when it comes to enrollment rates. So if you sample every 10 children in Ghana, you will get 8 out of them being in school. Okay, so the main issue that we have identified based on the MS data is that we have underage and overage children in school. And second, play-based learning is also an issue. So what are we going to do to address this gap? Is that one, the development of this guideline to empower parents and then the teachers and then the school as well. Parents in Ghana, and most of them think that educating children is solely for teachers. And then the teachers themselves also, although they are teaching, but the use of the play-based learning is some kind of a deficit in their teaching methods. So, because we have to develop these very guidelines so that we can actually drive early childhood education in Ghana. So someone also asks, what are some of the tactics? What are some of the tactics that have been most effective in advancing this this objective? Ghana, we have actually combined about 3 tactics that would help, okay, in actually addressing this issue. One is engagement. After engagement, we do what is called follow-up, and then third, we do what is called partnership. So the engagement is such that here in Ghana, we do engage the management of Ministry of Education and its principal agency called Ghana Education Service. So we engage the management. Then, of course, we'll have our work plan with them for them to see if it aligns with the education sector plan and the policies that we have actually developed. So after that, we'll discuss, and then if they buy in, then we have coalition in Ghana, as my brothers also said. this coalition is actually encapsulated in this coalition are, parents, teachers, CSOs, and other stakeholders in education. So we also sit down in a round table with them. Then we craft our advocacy messages. Okay, and after we have done that, then we have established national influencers. These established national influencers are parliamentarians. We have the clergy, we have pastors, we have Islamic scholars, we have traditional leaders, and then a lot of people who matter in education. Those people who speak, and then people buy in, who speak, and people accept, understand them. These are the people that we have also brought together. So after we have had our message, then we use them to educate the Ghanaian populace, starting from the national through to the school level. So the results. What are some of the results that we have seen? So, like I said, now we can see that our enrollment has actually rised up. So that's why I'm saying that if you pick 10 out of, I said 8 out of 10, 8 of them are in school. So enrollment has actually shot up, as I said. And it's also the partnership, the strong partnership that we have with the CSOs, with the parliamentarians, with the ministers and other things has also helped and has also resulted in increase in our finances with regards to early childhood activities. So these are some of the results that we have actually gotten. And then the buy-in of the Ghanaian populace is also one of the results. So talking about, what are some of the steps after we came from Tashkent? What are some of the steps that we have actually taken in place? So just next month, what Ghana is going to go in, we are going to contextualize what happened in Tashkent in Ghana. So what we are going to do is that we are bringing together all stakeholders in education, especially ECE practitioners. We are bringing them together and then zone the country into 3, the northern, the middle, and then the southern part, so that we communicate what happened in Tashkent to them, for them to get buy-in and also support and then add their input. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Isaac. I really enjoyed hearing about Ghana's experience. In particular, that last part about really communicating out to the public, what's happening in these global forums, seems really important. It's interesting, I loved having all 3 of you together because there's so many similarities between your stories. While the policy objectives might have been different across the 3 different case studies, right? We know this is all related to improving early childhood education, but you chose a different objective for each country, which was wonderful. I really loved hearing how there were so many similarities in the tactics, right? It seems like in every case, there was some combination of really making sure there was managing up to leadership and making sure they understood the messages, they had the content knowledge behind it. Really making sure, I think all 3 of you really talked about the importance of building a coalition, and the details of who needed to be part of that coalition, and how it needed to be done. I particularly enjoyed, Isaac, from the Ghana example, you listing the variety of stakeholders that needed to be engaged in order to really solidify that messaging. And then, from that, building a partnership kind of was a lovely commonality between the 3 countries. So I think we have roughly 10 minutes or so to go into a deeper discussion with the 3 of you. So I have a couple questions prepared, and if we have time, would love to kind of turn it over to some of the questions that have been coming in from the audience. But you know, maybe a quick question to all three of you, and I'll start in the order in which you spoke, is because you all spoke about coalition building. And maybe this can be just a quick question, maybe a 1-minute answer, but is there anything you would have done differently on coalition building, whether bringing in an actor that you maybe have forgotten, or the timeline? You know, is there anything in your experience from coalition building that you would have done differently? Massey, I'll turn it over to you first.
And yes, thank you very much, Christine. And yes, in our case, we are thinking of and also building coalition with the private sector, and because it is also very much important in terms of enhancing financing for ECE, and especially to galvanize domestic funds for ECE, considering the current context. And this is something we are also considering and very well as a country and as a group. And we also hope to leverage on that in terms of building partnership with the private sector to advance ECE financing in terms of the domestic fund. Over.
Thanks, Massey. Excellent point. Syed, from your perspective for Bangladesh, anything you would have done differently on coalition building?
Thank you, Christine. In terms of strategies, I mean, with working with government, I think we heard from all the panelists, it's a very tricky one because it's a policymakers we deal with. They're very busy people dealing with so many different policies. Priority comes into play at every point of point. So it's really about taking the right momentum. If I had to do something differently, of course, I would have engaged more partners into this, more global partners, and of course, with an emphasis of local partners to really bring in the essence of localization. But what I would ideally done different is really engage the government at a much earlier stage to show the all the work that is being done globally, to take the government education minister into these forums to really to see the work that has been done, and then eventually endorse, which has been done in Tashkent. But this would have been done differently if we could have started at least 5 years before.
Great, thank you so much. Over to you, Isaac. Anything you would have done differently on coalition building? Isaac, it appears you're still muted. We can't hear you.
Okay, so you can hear me. Yes. So apart from the coalition building, we have established National Steering Committee for Early Childhood Education in Ghana. And then we have technical working group who also assisted in the development of the policy and the ECE policy. These are the people that we are bringing together going forward. Or if I want to do something differently, that we are going to use them to help steer the affairs of early childhood education in Ghana. So they are going to be champions in early childhood education in Ghana.
Thank you so much. So my next, I have 2 more questions for the 3 of you. And thinking forward to our next panel coming up is from the global perspective and thinking about global partners. And I know that was one of Syed's comments that, you know, coalition building wish he engaged more with global partners. So I want to offer you, you know, 2 questions kind of thinking about the global side of things. The first I'll ask you is, you know, what support do you need from global partners, you know, to advance some of those policy commitments made at TESH and both TESH and Tashkent? Massey, over to you. Do you mind giving us a start?
Yes, we know most times, and a global event comes with lots of commitment and from government, but it's about implementation, and it's also about and knowledge. Yeah. So what we want from global partners is to support the structures and for knowledge sharing and follow-up mechanisms for post-TES and then the tax change. Yeah, such support and can offer potential for knowledge sharing globally And we'll also strengthen innovation, policy implementation, and then development in EC governance and financing. That is key, and that is the support we really require from our global partners. And in terms of, okay, I think,
yeah, we can stop.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you so much, Massey. You know, I really take that one to heart. That global partners can support structures for knowledge sharing. That was a key finding. Syed, over to you.
What I would urge from the global partners would be to support the new innovations around play-based ECD and social emotional learning. Partners need to work on increasing funding for ECT globally in developing both national systems and humanitarian sectors around the world. There need to be more coordination mechanisms and general awareness in crisis settings and underdeveloped nations for early childhood care and education. Creating strategic networks and communities of practices for cross-learning opportunities with a focus on having a collecting vision for ECC around the globe. That would be my ask from the global partners.
Excellent ask. Thanks so much, Syed. Over to you, Isaac.
Okay, so I will start from this. I think knowledge sharing is very, very important. Okay, so we want the world to help us in what is called exchange programs. Okay, so like Ghana, we can come to maybe US to share ideas. They also come to share ideas with us, and even in the whole world. And then second, I'm thinking of doing more research, okay, to also establish a lot of gaps in ECE so that we can also address it. Third, I think in Ghana, what we also need, especially at the ministry level and then the Ghana education level, is also professional development. I think if the group, or our partners will also come in to support in giving scholarship to other officers who want to read up to the PhD level, would also help Ghana. And second, high level engagement, like what we are doing, is very, very critical. So more often we see this so that we can update ourselves and then learn from each other. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Isaac. And my final question on thinking about global partners, and I hope our next panelists are listening to these, is really kind of what recommendations do you have for us as global partners, to ensure these global commitments, made at TESS and made at the World Conference on ECCE are leveraged to advance these policies at the country level. I know we ask a lot of you at the country level, maybe so much that, you have a lot of work to get done in country, and I know sometimes as global partners, we put a lot of pressure on you for some of these global commitments. So I'm hoping this is an opportunity for you to be honest back to us, about these recommendations. Over to you, Massey.
Yes, thank you very much. And for us, we see that global partners should come together and adopt intersectoral and inclusive strategies, for the development and reviewing of policy and practice in ECE. The declarations have been made, and now what global partners should do, they should come together and develop such inclusive and intersectoral strategies. And secondly, again, global partners should leverage on global partnership and support, and then support multiple stakeholders at country level to develop coherent, consistent, system-wide plans and roadmap for comprehensive implementation of policy on ECE financing, which in our context is really a limitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Massey. Over to you, Syed. I'm sorry, you're muted at the moment. We can't hear you.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah. In terms of recommendation to global partners, I know I keep saying this, we need to raise funds for implementation. I think my example of a pilot of 3,000 schools that has to go scale for 65,000 government primary school where this kind of service needs to be elevated, this requires massive funding. So yeah, one of the core ask would be to encourage funding on innovations for actors around the world and organize more platforms like the World Conference and the Global Refugee Forums to engage government policymakers in forums and roundtables to drive accountability amongst them in order to prioritize the early years children and their development. For implementers, there needs to be a massive focus on learning from the communities that we work in to design models and solutions most relevant to them and generating evidence around them. These learnings and legacy packages need to be disseminated in these platforms so that the world can draw in from these examples.
Thank you so much, Syed. Last words over to you, Isaac.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think my colleagues are always hammering on funding. I mean, funding is one of the key, challenges that we are all facing. Not only in Africa, worldwide. So, the global partners should help. See to that we should have even resource mobilization decks for the group that we can, try and solicit funds from to develop or to drive our activities in Ghana and elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Isaac, and a big round of applause for the three panelists. I really enjoyed your country experiences. I think these were great country stories to share with us, and I think globally we've learned a lot, even just from your 10 minutes or so of sharing them. For me, I'm walking away with a couple, highlighted points that I think is excellent to carry over into our next session. Right, the need to, resource mobilization, raising funds for this particular area, more global platforms to focus on this key issue, more supporting structures for knowledge sharing, more supporting new innovations and more coordinated actions amongst global partners, and focusing on some of these key research gaps are all great asks to us. So thank you again to our distinguished panelists. And I'd love to turn it back to Elizabeth to take us over to the global panel.
Thank you so much, Christine, and thank you, Syed and Isaac. I really enjoyed your presentations and bringing that reality check of what is actually happening at the country level in carrying on these commitments. So we once again shift gears to a global level to discuss next steps for implementing policy commitments made at the country level. We would also like you to reflect on the need you heard and the request from the country panelists. So joining us today, we have Divya Latta with UNICEF, Rokaya Diawara with UNESCO, and Emily Garin with Sesame Workshop. Unfortunately, the World Bank could not join us today due to a last-minute scheduling conflict. And in the interest of time, I'll read all the questions and provide each one of you an opportunity to address what is most relevant to your work. And we'll begin with Divya, then move to Rokaya, and then Emily. So here are the questions. What are the next steps for advancing the TESS and the World Conference on ECCE policy commitments at the global and regional level? What are your reflections after hearing from advocates at the country level? How will your agency engage with country level actors on ECE advocacy to follow up on TESS and the World Conference on ECCE commitments? And what specific ideas do you have for country level partners to leverage the agenda and commitments we've discussed today in their countries? What do you think will be the most impactful in terms of building political commitment within government? Over to you, Divya.
Greetings, friends and colleagues. It's my real pleasure to join this discussion, especially after being informed by such an exciting panel led by our colleagues from country offices and the governments. A real delight to be here. Going straight into the first question of looking at policy commitments and what can be done at the global level, I think much as we are very excited to see the commitments that have been made through the TESS and also elevated through the World Conference, we know and we have just seen from the examples shared from countries, so much of work has to go on to really make these aspirations into viable, meaningful, and sustainable realities that can benefit children in real time. For us at UNICEF, we are committed to continuing to work with our coalition partners to draw upon the experiences and the good practices, successes, as well as challenges that we see at country level, and to learn from that to be elevated at the regional and global stage to inform how we move forward and how we bring our learning together to continue to work in a very informed way on these issues. UNICEF has been very excited about our partnership with the GPE in this regard, where we developed the BELLS framework that has been at the bedrock of all these initiatives. And in the next phase of KICS that we are engaging under today, it has also led to the development of the toolkit, which has been used in several countries. From our side, we also see the success of having done the advocacy through the global report that UNICEF had curated in 2019. Now the next global report is being proposed, and we are very happy to join UNESCO in really taking that initiative forward, drawing from the lessons that we are learning across countries. We are really hearing very well the real focus everybody is bringing on financing and here. So I'll just take one quick example of the toolkit, how it informs countries in not only choosing and prioritizing some of the priorities that come from systematic sector analysis, but also taking forward the initiative through cost and financing simulations that can help prioritize and match the priorities with the funding envelope so that we can make real progress in real time. And these kind of lessons, what countries are prioritizing, how financing is being mobilized, these are to be elevated at the regional and global levels so that we can all benefit from that, that learning. I'll be very quick on two other points. We also want to recognize this firm recognition of pre-primary education as an integral part of foundational learning. And both at the action level, but also in our advocacy, UNICEF will continue to work with partners to elevate that. Finally, I want to also recognize that taking our initiative forward, we have, especially for supporting work at the country level, we have already got more than 50 focal points on ECE within the UNICEF structures. And this number is growing as we have more and more countries participating in the training around ECE toolkit and how it can be used. We further encourage our partners to use this and also help us to elevate the outcomes coming from the use of these tools, and that we are continuing to curate on the toolkit itself as we look at how implementation of the proposed plans happens and how they are then, what kind of results they bring. My final point is to invite partners also to work with us to nurture the government stewardship that has been highlighted by Euphrates, and also we see very good examples and reflections of that from the country examples, to work with us so that we can mobilize public-private partnership, the community-based approaches, and the innovative mechanisms for financing and other resources to be brought forth for impactful and sustainable ECE systems. Finally, the 5 Million Futures initiative that UNICEF has proposed is actually looking at more than 60 countries that we see are at the tipping point of scaling up ECE. And I think that is very significant. Even in this very competitive environment, it gives us a way forward to work closely with countries, but also mobilizing our regional and global fora to keep that momentum going and, in fact, work towards the expansion of ECE at scale in both development and humanitarian situations. I'm going to stop there. There are some very interesting examples of the questions that have come up, which I can address during the quick Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Divya. This is also very exciting about the 5 Million Futures initiative, but also very exciting that UNESCO and UNICEF will work together on the global report, because that will help us to continuously show progress, but also the gaps that we continuously need to do. I'm also very excited about the innovative financing and the importance of costing as well, but building public and private partnerships as well as with communities. So thank you, Divya. Now over to you, Rokaya.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Good afternoon, colleagues. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Yes. Yes. I would like first to start by really appreciating all this passion, the excitement. Also, we are noticed from the different speakers, both from the partner side or also from the countries, to keep this momentum going regarding the World Conference and what have been done also through the test mechanism and so. So I think this is something extremely important for all of us, and to come a little bit more focus on what we as UNESCO are planning to do, also in collaboration with all the partners. I would like again to build on the 3 tracks already highlighted by my colleague Guang Chol, which are around implementation, monitoring, coordination, and partnership. Regarding the implementation and the monitoring, the one important aspect for us is really to be sure that the monitoring framework is on place, is developed and approved by the different parties around this Tashkent Declaration. What we are aiming to do is to develop a draft, to prepare it as a working document to be presented and also to share it with all the partners and also some other representative from the member states to look at it and to adopt it. And we will call for a global expert meeting in April, May to agree around how we would like really together, all together. I'm not speaking about UNESCO to do the work, but it's just to create the occasion for all the partners to work with member states to agree on that framework, which will serve also for the monitoring of the SDG 4.2. That SDG 4.2 monitoring, we all agree today, is more focused on very specific aspect, and there are some important indicators maybe where we don't have today enough data, and it will be maybe an occasion also to negotiate again with our institute in charge of statistics to develop a new series of indicators also to be considered for the monitoring of this SDG 4.2 target. For doing that one, UNESCO is seeking also to put in place a team for result. That team for result will be something maybe we are drawing from the global partnership strategy we all worked together 1 and 2 years ago, and which would kind of mechanism to have all the partners working and defining key strategies for the early childhood. Those strategies are today linked to what we have already in the Tashkent Declaration, and will serve also in the monitoring process in addition to this global report we are referring to. We would like to have this global report published in November 2023, the first session. It will be a biannual report, and we are looking for UNICEF. Thank you so much already to UNICEF colleagues for giving their approval on the proposals. We are also discussing with World Bank, with GPE, with OECD, with ILO. We would like to really bring all of them together and work, of course, with under the also technical support of ECDAN to bring all the different stakeholders to discuss and to publish this very important piece for all of us. And finally, we don't want in terms of monitoring also to have something disconnected to the existing mechanisms. This is why we are really looking for leveraging what we will do in that sense with the global mechanism coordination for the SDG 4, and by doing so, we are also thinking about to be the maximum possible close to the to the level of decision by bringing also around the table the different regional community. The regional economic communities on board and to work together and to organize regional thematic meetings to discuss how we can go forward. In terms of country support, what is also on our plan? After hearing from advocates at country level, strong passion from Ghana, from Sierra Leone, Bangladesh representative, we must acknowledge the challenge and opportunities faced by countries in implementing early childhood policy and program. We would like to recognize the importance of engaging with country-level actors to ensure effective advocacy follow-up for the Tashkent Declaration. concrete action will be the creation of this community of practice. I think this is something we have heard from all the representatives from the countries. The three talk about that one. It is extremely important for us to have this community of practice to exchange promising practices. You may recall during the preparation phase of the World Conference, we call also all the member states to prepare and to share some promising practices they have for the 4 themes we work on during that conference. And we are now preparing it in a form of interactive compendium of promising practices. This will serve really for the peer learning, and as it will be interactive and country will be able to update by uploading new initiative and so on. Finally, in terms of support to countries also, we will encourage them to review their existing legal framework, which is also extremely important, and we will push them also to identify opportunities to strengthen and launch effective ECCE flagships. By working all together and strengthening national qualification framework also for the ECCE personnel, this will be something extremely important. And in terms of concrete tools, we have our office in Bangkok who has just published a teacher training handbook for social and emotional learning. This one will be useful and could complement the UNICEF ECD toolkit accelerator we already talk about. Our last point will be maybe about our engagements also to revamp, to revitalize the global partnership strategy for early childhood, which is a common good for all of us. This is a common good for all the partners. Together, we can identify key strategy and concrete activities to be implemented at global, regional, and country level. This is a strong tool for all of us as partners to deliver together in the implementation of the ECD agenda toward 2030 agenda. UNESCO recommends revitalizing this mechanism and making it operational. This is maybe some important element we would like to share with you. And the last point could be around the political commitment with government, which could include also engage with decision maker and government officials at all levels to raise awareness about the importance of early childhood, leverage data and evidence to demonstrate also the impact of early childhood on ECCE. And finally, foster partnership and condition with civil society organization, the private sector and other stakeholders to build a broad-based movement for ECD and mobilize resources on that. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We will remain available for also participating more actively on the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Rokaya. This is really exciting and really happy to hear about the focus on implementation, having a monitoring framework that everybody will be able to participate in. We have many measurement tools, and last week we just had another exciting launch of the Global Development Score that will give us population level comparative data for children aged 0 to 3. And then we have all these other ECDI, the World Bank AIM. I think the challenge for us is how we actually integrate and harmonize around methodologies and so on. Really excited that you're focusing on results and highlighting the issue of legal frameworks, which has been a huge gap, and wonderful to see that we will also have a mechanism for peer learning between countries. So thank you, Rokaya, and now over to Emily.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth and team, for inviting me today. I want to talk a little bit about a group we haven't discussed as much, but that is going to be truly essential to achieving all of the SDGs, which are children and families who have been displaced or otherwise affected by emergencies. Because there's a growing number of them and a growing intensity and length of the displacement that they're facing. Sesame Workshop, along with our partners, are actually doing a number of different things to make sure that we can reach these children with the resources that they need. I'll leave apart the kind of programming piece of it for a little bit and talk about 3 different ways that we're working to make sure that the resources are available to our partners at the country level. So the first I'll call What's Counted Counts. And this is really sort of the key to getting funding through the formal UN humanitarian system. So if we want ECD and the full breadth of interventions, not just early education, to be funded, we have to make sure that those needs are appropriately assessed in the first case when emergency needs assessments are done, that they're included in the plans and that they're included in the appeals. So to that end, we have been doing not only direct advocacy with agencies at the global level to change their assessment and appeals processes, but also providing tools to our colleagues at a country or crisis level who are involved more directly in the actual assessment and appeals processes to make sure that young children and their caregivers are represented from the very first day, from the very first analysis of crisis-related needs. With that, we can open a much wider envelope of potential funding for children in those contexts. The second thing I'll say is coming from an even broader lens, which is that money matters. We've heard it from a lot of folks about the fact that the resources matter, not only coming from the government, but particularly in crisis contexts, from external donors themselves. So it's great to get them in the plan, great to get them in the appeals, but if there isn't money coming from donors to match it, it's not doing a tremendous amount of good in the humanitarian space. So the Moving Minds Alliance, which is another ECD group focused on children in emergencies, is working together to influence some of the major donors in this space and to curate more. Sesame and the International Rescue Committee have been really focused on the US government as a donor. And we've gone through a whole number of different processes to make sure not only that there is more funding coming from the US government, but that it's better quality and that it's more driven by the actual evidence of what works. So we've started with champion building, looking at improved tracking of how ECD spending happens across the US government, generating our evidence and sharing it with them to inform the work that they actually fund, and then finally going into direct advocacy with legislators and members of USAID. So I think that's a second way that we're really concretely looking to support. The third one I'll cover really quickly, which is advocating for advocacy. And I think this is one that matters to everyone. The folks on this call, I suspect, all believe that advocacy works and is a really essential way to making sure that the SDGs and all of our other goals are achieved. But there is not as clear an understanding of that across the government, the donor, and other entities to really clearly understand how advocacy works and why it's so important. So as part of a big project we're doing with the LEGO Foundation called Play to Learn, we have funded a series of reports that actually traces out how advocacy creates change over time to make the case that advocacy is a core piece that should be involved in the work of all of our partners. And that it is essential to achieving the long-term goals that we have beyond simple project delivery in whatever context we may be working. So in the future, we're very hopeful that donors will take this up and have a better understanding of why advocacy is important. So those, counting what counts, making sure the money matters, and advocating for advocacy are three of the really concrete ways that we're excited to support our colleagues.
Okay, thank you so much, Emily. And I'm noting the time. We only have 5 minutes left, but this is all very exciting, and I think this is just the beginning of the conversation. We will have many more webinars to also reflect on some of these issues that have come up. And thank you, Emily, for highlighting leveraging data and evidence and influencing donor countries like the USA as well to use evidence-based support to countries. So we don't really have time to answer questions, but I just want to note the questions that I have seen coming up. There were questions on disability and how we address the issues of children left behind, developmental delays, measurement, quality, systems strengthening, and how we agree on indicators, especially to make sure that we disaggregate and also know the issues around those children who are left behind or have disabilities and developmental delays. Sorry, the organizers, can we give 3 minutes to Alexis to quickly say where the tools and resources for advocates might be found? You literally have 2 minutes.
Not a worry at all. Hi, everyone. I'm Alexis. I work for UNICEF on the ECE team, working on communications and advocacy. I will drop the link in the chat. We've been referencing it throughout the text today. It contains a comprehensive list of resources for actual tools for building your strategy, stakeholder analysis, doing your actual advocacy strategy canvas, identifying impacts and outcomes, which has come through a lot in the chat today, and also some case studies and comprehensive toolkits, some of which touch on specific contexts like in emergencies. And I wanted to highlight there are many tools also listed in that from the ECE Accelerated Toolkit that will help you understand the ECE subsector, so that will inform your targets for advocacy. So please do use those. There's a whole list of advocacy tools on there and also subsector planning tools. So I'm just going to drop it in the chat. Many thanks, and over back to you. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Alexis. And now over to you, Christine, my co-moderator, to close us out.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I want to first thank everyone who was involved today. So thank you to you, Elizabeth, as well as Euphrates, Gwang Chul, Isaac, Massey, Syed, Divya, Rokaya, Emily, and especially to the teams at ECDAN and UNICEF, Alexis, Brett, Joa, everyone involved. Thank you for pulling together such a great webinar today. We had great global participation, a really active audience listing lots of questions and answers, or questions for us that unfortunately we weren't able to get today, but I actually see this as a positive sign for the demand for more information and more dialogue on this. So, you know, that's my plug back to ECDAN and UNICEF for, you know, let's see how we can collaborate together on kind of additional fora like this to get into these issues a little deeper. The last 2 points, you know, I want to make in closing. One, an additional plug for the ECE Accelerator Toolkit as a great resource for a lot of these advocacy materials. So I know that will be coming, those links will be coming to all of you, but it's such a great resource, and I just want to make sure that we're all using it. And it's also a living document, so there's an opportunity to contribute to it and shape it with more country examples and success stories. And then my final closing point is something that really has been mentioned over and over and over today, has been to keep the momentum going, right? You know, I'm thinking of Syed's example for Bangladesh about building off the momentum, you know, from the coalition, you know, and making sure that, you know, we're engaging everyone either at the countryside with the governments or thinking more globally. We've come off these exciting global events and there is this initial momentum. It's easy for us to kind of all sit back and kind of take a deep breath and recover from all the effort that went into it. But really, you know, we need to make sure that we're keeping that momentum going, keeping early childhood in that dialogue and pushing it forward both at the local, national, regional, and global levels. So thank you again, everyone today. And, you know, I think we'll be in touch with further communications on all of the resources that we shared today. All the best.
Thank you, Christine. And now we can close off the webinar, but to be continued. Thanks to all the participants and all the wonderful questions. Bye.